What's up, guys? This is the review of the 2016 Mazda 6 Touring. This is the third generation of the Mazda 6, and it was first produced in North America as the 2014 model year, and it's the car that's still in production to this day. When this car was first released, it came available in three trims: the entry-level sport trim, the mid-level touring trim, which is what you see here, and then the top of the line grand touring trim. And what was interesting when these cars were first released is that Mazda only offered one engine option for all of those trims, and that engine was Mazda's 2.5 liter Skyactiv G inline 4-cylinder engine, which produced 184 horsepower and 185 foot-pound of torque, and it propelled this car 0 to 60 in about 7 seconds. Now that's a little bit of a unique feature. With most other car manufacturers, they will offer different types of engine options for effectively the same model of a car, and typically your higher trim levels are going to be coming equipped with a more potent engine that produces more horsepower and more torque, and then your lower trim levels will come equipped with, an engine that produces less horsepower and has less torque. Not the case with the Mazda 6 when it was first released. So whether you buy the Sport Touring or the Grand Touring, the engine that came equipped in those cars was that same 4-cylinder engine. That was the case at least until 2018, when Mazda ended up releasing a turbo version of this engine, a Turbo 4, and I believe the horsepower ratings on that one were around 250 horsepower and 310 foot-pound of torque, and that increased the acceleration of that particular vehicle into the 6-second range, 0 to 60. Let's talk about the design of this car. I personally think that the Mazda 6 is one of the best looking four-door sedans on the market, regardless of the price point. This particular car exemplifies Mazda's Kodo design, and Kodo stands for Soul of Motion. And what that means, or I guess what the goal of Mazda's designers is when they're coming up with the designs of these cars that are applying this Kodo technique, is to effectively design a car that's going to look like it's moving even when it's standing still. And Mazda designers, study the shapes that different animals make. I think that they look, for example, what a cheetah looks like when it runs, and sort of try to take those shapes that are created by animals in motion and translate them into the design of a car. And as you can see here, that has completely worked. This car is absolutely gorgeous, and it looks like a premium vehicle. In the back, I don't know if you can see this because of the shadowing, but there's basically two twin exhausts, one on each side. You've got these sleek taillights that kind of wrap around the rear end of the car. You have this line that starts here and basically goes all the way through the two doors, and then as you follow that line, you get introduced with two more lines, one that kind of goes down from this bottom and over the front fender, and then also the one that just sort of comes from the A-pillar and goes all the way through the hood. So gorgeous looking car. At the front end, you see this awesome grille, where Mazda ended up replacing the smiley face that was found in so many of its models in previous generations, the CX-9, the Mazda Miata, the previous generation 6. So that smiley face is gone. Then you get this really awesome bumper that makes the car look really good. Again, this is the 2016 model, so this was somewhat of a facelifted car. What's unique about Mazda is that they've kind of upgraded the car from in 2016 and then again in 2018. So they've been adding updates to this car on a more regular basis than what you'd find with other car manufacturers. But you know, the design in the 2016 was slightly changed from what was in the 2015. I think the headlights were changed a little bit, and they also added these things where the kind of like the fog lights, I guess, would be, but there's no fog lights. So again, gorgeous looking car. The rims on this car look awesome. The Touring and the Grand Touring models came equipped with 19-inch rims, which is what you see here, and they do a really good job of kind of, you know, filling that gap and giving this car a really athletic and sporty appearance. I think with the sport model, the standards were the 17-inch rims, and you know, I definitely, if I were buying one, I'd make sure to get these 19-inch rims and upgrade those. But gorgeous looking car. This being the Touring model, it didn't come equipped with a sunroof, so it's kind of a slick top, but has a very nice, sleek, sophisticated appearance. I think this color is called Meteor Gray, and it makes the car look awesome. All right, let's go ahead and look inside. All right, let's take a look at the inside of the vehicle. And you know, as we do that, it's important to remember that this is a four-door family sedan, right? This is a family vehicle that's going to serve as a daily driver. So in addition to looking good and looking sporty and sleek and being fun to drive, it's critically important for this car to have a utilitarian function. It needs to be useful, right? And if you have a family, obviously what you need is a car that's going to have enough space for, you know, some multiple people to ride in it. So let's start off with the trunk of this car. The trunk space is really good, actually. For demonstration purposes, I put two big, you know, Tupperwares of clothes in here just to kind of show you the size of that. And if you push that all the way in, you still have quite a bit of trunk space left, you know, to store other things there. So, you know, starting with the trunk, pretty nice, big, large trunk, where you can store a lot of things in there. So let's close that. Let's open the back door. Here's the rear of the car, and as you can see, there's quite a bit of legroom in the back. I mean, an adult can comfortably sit in here. I'm going to demonstrate, and keep in mind, I'm 6'3", so this driver's seat is positioned for somebody my size, and here I am in the back. As you can tell, I've got plenty of room for my legs when I put them together, and I also have plenty of, I mean, not a ton, but you know, if I'm sitting upright, the top of my head's not touching the roof. So it's a very nice place to sit in. And you know, you can pull this as well. You've got your cup holders, or you know, kind of put that back up. And if you have somebody sit in the middle here, what I really like about this car is that sort of this column is pretty low. It's lower than in most cars. So if you have somebody that's sitting in the middle seat like I am, you know, you can easily, you know, put your legs there, and then there's, you know, there's room for a couple more people. Obviously, you don't want somebody my size sitting in the middle, but it's a you know, pretty good rear space, which I know is important. All right, guys, here we are on in the inside of the 2016 Mazda 6 Touring, and the interior of this car is super nice. I mean, this car really has the feel of a luxury vehicle and not a mid-level vehicle. There's a lot of soft touch materials here, on the sides here. I think the layout is super nice and user friendly. You've got your infotainment system right here. The 2016 model came with the Mazda Connect. So I guess it's similar to Apple CarPlay, where you could plug your phone in and things of that nature. It's got the push button start. Obviously you've got your vents right here. Here you've got dual climate control, but again, very easy and intuitive to use. This particular car comes equipped with an automatic transmission. That was not, and that was actually available. There was a manual transmission option available as well on sport and touring models all the way up until 2019. So it's super nice to know that you could actually purchase this car with a manual transmission if you wanted to, but I think this automatic's great. The 2016 also came with the sport button, so that sharpens the throttle response and allows you to hold the gears longer when you feel like driving the car in a more spirited manner. In 2016, the big change was with this infotainment screen. In 2014 and 2015, that screen was integrated into the kind of this dashboard here. But in 2016, it came equipped with a bigger screen, and it kind of has more of a a tablet look there, which is kind of reminiscent of the BMW 3 Series in the way they would include a display screen like that. Here's the steering wheel. The steering wheel is super nice. You've got the 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock notches for extra grips, and it's a fairly thick steering wheel. And then on the steering wheel you have a bunch of different buttons, which I think are very nice to have on a daily driver. So you've got your volume, you got your pick up the phone, call, hang up, all of that, that's on the steering wheel itself, which is nice. That's something that you used to see on luxury vehicles, and now you can see it in a car like this. And then here are the gauges. Again, very easy to see, very clear to see. You've got automatic windows, and here are your cup holders. Pretty nice big cup holders where you can hold a big drink. You close that up and it kind of gives it this cool smooth look. This almost kind of has a rubbery feel to it. And then here's your storage compartment. Comes you can put your USB. There's a USB port in there, and plenty of storage room there. The seats are nice. You got bolstering on the sides. Interestingly enough, and I guess it's at some points you have to save on cost, but only the driver's seat comes with power controls. The passenger seat is kind of a manual adjustments, so I'm not if there's kind of one drawback to it, it's this. But at some point you gotta find ways to save costs if you're going to be offering this car for less than $25,000. But all in all, just an excellent vehicle. Very nice. Again, it's getting much harder and harder to differentiate these cars, these kind of mid-level cars, from your luxury vehicles, because the interior of this car and the features that it comes equipped with are pretty much in line with what you would find in a luxury vehicle. And it's going to be interesting to see how these luxury car makers respond, because I'm sure the consumers, when they realize that they can get a car that looks this good from the outside, that looks like a premium vehicle, and that looks this good from the inside, and it comes equipped with all these standard features, which would all be add-ons, right? If you were trying to purchase a luxury vehicle, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond, because I can tell you that most consumers are going to be hard pressed to spend an additional $15,000 to $20,000 on a luxury vehicle that in many ways feels the same as a car that costs less than $25,000, and that may also come equipped with more standard features than what you'd get in a $50,000 car. So the next few years I think are going to be very interesting to see how these luxury makers respond. All right, guys, we're about to take the 2016 Mazda Touring for a little test drive, and one of the questions that I'm going to try to answer today during the drive is this a Japanese BMW? Because in many ways, many people have always referred to Mazdas as the Japanese BMW. And if you think about it, that makes sense. BMW has always been known for building driver-centric cars. I mean, their ethos is the ultimate driving machine or the joy of driving, and that communicates to the consumer that, hey, we're going to build a car that's going to be geared towards driver enjoyment, driver involvement, things of that nature. And then Mazda, when it started producing the Mazda 6 in 2003, it started using the moniker of Zoom Zoom, again, communicating that it is a driver-centric type of a company that focuses on driver involvement, driver enjoyment, and making sure that it's creating cars that are fun to drive. And I think if you look at Mazda's portfolio over the years, I mean, they've made some really awesome car enthusiast cars. Obviously, the most famous one is the Mazda Miata, which for the past 30 years has pretty much defined the affordable roadster segment. But they've also had some other really fun cars during that time period. The Mazda RX-8, for example, was an awesome and a fun car to drive. It got a lot of hate because the rotary Wankel engine made it difficult to live with on a day-to-day basis, but just in terms of fun and driver enjoyment, it's one of the most fun cars that you can drive. So that's one of the things that I'm going to try to answer during today's test drive, which is this a Japanese BMW? What's up, guys? This is going to be the driving review of the 2016 Mazda 6 Touring. And during today's review, my goal is going to be to answer 3 questions for you. The first question is going to be whether the driving dynamics of this car achieve the intended purpose of this car. So, do the driving dynamics of this car fulfill the objective of this car and why it was created in the first place? The second part of the review, I'm going to address how the driving dynamics of this car stack up to the driving dynamics of the other cars against which this car competes. So a competitor review. And then the third question that I'm going to answer is whether the driving dynamics of this car result in this car effectively being a Japanese BMW. So let's start off with the first question, i.e. whether the driving characteristics of this car match the intended purpose of this car. And to answer that question, we of course have to define what the purpose of this car is. This is a family sedan. Okay, this car has been designed to be an affordable mid-size family sedan. It's supposed to be a luxury. It's supposed to be a multi-purpose vehicle. It's supposed to be a vehicle that's used as a daily driver. It's supposed to be a vehicle that reliably and affordably allows a person with a family to go about their day. Okay, and if those are sort of if that's how we define the objective and the purpose of this car, then I can tell you that the driving dynamics of this car match perfectly for that intended function. Okay, again, we already talked about how affordable this car is. If this is going to be your daily driver, it's also important for this car to be fuel efficient, right? And this car is very fuel efficient. I think that the estimates are 26 miles per gallon in the city, 38 miles per gallon on the highway, and sort of a combined EPA estimate of 30 miles per gallon. And that's using, 87 regular fuel, 87 octane. So in that regard, that's a really good thing to have in your daily driver. I mean, as fun as it is to drive a car with a high horsepower output, if you're driving on a daily basis and you're only getting 8 to 10 or 12 miles per gallon, you do that for a couple years, you're gonna start to feel the effect of that. So in that regard, this car is a really good car. It's comfortable in here. It's a pleasant place to sit. It's not very loud in the cabin. I think there's adequate damping here to where it makes it into a comfortable ride. There's plenty of room for 4 adults in here. And all in all, this particular car, the dynamics of it are actually perfect for doing just this, commuting to work like what I'm doing now. Is this the fastest car on the road? Absolutely not. At 184 horsepower and 185 foot-pound of torque, it's not going to win you many drag races. But then again, are you going to be drag racing when you're, going to work on your daily commutes? I mean, the speed limit doesn't change regardless of, how much horsepower your car has. So I think in that regard, the fact that this is going to be used mostly as your daily driver, and you're basically going to be bound to speed, the speed limits or 50 miles per hour or less, unless you're in the highway, and even that you're at 70 miles per hour. The fact that there isn't a lot of horsepower and a lot of torque in this car relatively makes it super fun to drive, because you can kind of push it on back roads like this, and it's like the old adage goes, it's a lot more fun to drive a slow car fast than it is to drive a fast car slow, and I think this car certainly fulfills that. On top of that, this car is really light. I mean, that's a really nice thing about this car. I mean, this car weighs 3,200 pounds. Okay, this is a mid-size sedan. You compare this car to the likes of the Mercedes E-Class, the BMW 5 Series. Those cars are approaching 4,000 pounds. And again, I'm a big fan of lighter vehicles. I think they're just, they handle better, and they just move easier. It's just easier, for the car to move, because it's got less weight to carry. So in that regard, again, this car feels really good. I think the handling's really good. I think the steering in this car, the feedback, I think this is also an electrically assisted steering rack, but it still provides you a lot of good feedback, through the steering wheel, which is again another very nice feature. So again, this car definitely fulfills its intended purpose through the driving dynamics. It's a comfortable cruiser. I think one of the complaints that people have about the car that I've read online is they think that the suspension of this car is too stiff for it to be a daily driver, and that's just absolutely not the case. I think the only people who would think that the suspension of this car is too stiff to be used on a daily basis are people who've never actually driven a sports car. I mean, if you were to drive this car back to back with my BMW Z4, you would get a much better understanding of what stiff suspension feels like. The suspension is compliant, it's comfortable, it's probably a little bit stiffer than the competition. We'll talk about that in just a second. But that's not to say that this is an uncomfortable car. This car is very comfortable to drive. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question is, how did the driving dynamics of this car stack up to its competitors? Of course, to define the competitors of these cars, those are going to be your Toyota Camrys, Honda Accords, Nissan Altimas, Volkswagen Passats, etc. And I think the general consensus is, and I agree with this general consensus, that the driving characteristics, the driving dynamics of this car are a little bit more geared towards the sporty side of the equation. I think if you're gonna be driving into in a Toyota Camry or an Altima, it's gonna be a little bit softer. There's gonna be a little bit of softer feel. There's gonna be a more body roll than what you get in this car. So this car is again tuned to the more sporty side of the equation. But again, that's all relative to the segment in which it lives. So obviously, if you were to compare this again to a sports car, a two-seater roadster, I don't think anybody would be thinking, in comparison to those vehicles, that this is the suspension is stiff. But the car handles very nicely, and it's got sharp handling, crisp handling, etc. I think in terms of the engine output, again, I know that Mazda introduced a higher powered option in 2018, I believe, but when this car came out in 2016, this was the only engine available. I think some of the competitors, give consumers more offerings in that regard. So if you're looking for a car that's going to be really fast off the traffic light, there's going to be, the competitors are probably going to be better in that regard. But that's not something that will be a deciding factor for me. I think the car is really fun to drive. Again, I enjoy pushing this 4-cylinder engine on back roads like this, without getting into trouble and driving at excessive speeds. I think that's probably a little bit of a difference. You might find this car to have slower acceleration than some of its competitors at the upper level trims. But then again, I think that the handling and just the overall feel of the car more that makes up for it. So if I were in the market for an affordable mid-size sedan, this is probably the one that I would go with, just because of its driving characteristics and its handling characteristics. Okay, and then sort of the third question that I'm going to answer today is whether this particular car, this Mazda 6 Touring, is a Japanese BMW. And when we say BMW, what I'm really referring to are those BMWs of the past that had an analog feel to it. I mean, we're talking about the BMW E39 5 Series, the BMW E60 5 Series, the BMW E90 5 Series. I mean, those are really the cars that car enthusiasts love and rave about. And I think some of the, if you look at kind of modern day 5 Series, it's going to be a much different feel. I mean, those cars really feel more like the 7 Series of the past, if not the 5 Series of the past. So that's what when we say that a Japanese BMW, really what we're saying, we're asking is whether it is a BMW, from the past. And I think that while this car, it's close. This car is close to it, but the short answer is no, and I'll tell you why. I think the car looks great. I think the handling is pretty nice, but I think where this car falls short in comparison to those Japanese or those BMWs that we all love and miss is there's two components to it. It's the front wheel drive that's in this car, and it's the engine. So let's talk about both of those. You can tell that this is a front wheel drive vehicle. Because when you're driving this car on the back roads, it's kind of twisty, you can kind of tell that the front wheels of the car have two functions. One of them is to, for them to move the car, and then the other is for them to, direct or control the direction in which the car is going, right? And when you're in a rear-wheel drive vehicle like a BMW, you can definitely feel the rear-wheel drive layout in that particular car, because when you're on the back roads and in the twisties, and you're kind of moving the wheel and are operating at a moderate speed or high level of speed, you can tell through the steering wheel that the front wheels are completely focused on controlling the direction of the car. So there's not a lot of movement in the steering wheel. You kind of point it, and those front wheels are sort of focused on staying in that direction and making sure the car goes in that direction. And then the rear wheel drive layout, i.e. the power comes from the rear wheels, you almost kind of feel it pushing you from behind as you're turning the corner. So that makes the car feel very balanced in turns when you're driving a rear wheel drive sports sedan. And unfortunately with this car, because it is, you can just feel the front wheel drive aspect to it, because when you're going in those twisties, you can sense that the front wheels are doing two things, and almost the rear of the car almost feels like it's being dragged through the turn by the front wheels of the car. Okay, so I think, and I've kind of commented on this in some Mazda forums, that if Mazda would put rear-wheel drive in a Mazda 6, I think they would be very, very close to effectively creating a Japanese BMW. And Mazda has had some great rear-wheel drive platforms. I alluded to this earlier in the video, but one of the most fun cars I've ever driven was the Mazda RX-8. The car is so much fun to drive, and it's so, like, the handling of it is amazing. And I can't help but think that whenever I drive this car, even though it's nice and I like so many different things about it, I just can't help but think, how much better it would be if you could have that rear-wheel drive platform that you find in Mazda RX-8. So that's one shortcoming. And the second shortcoming is the engine in this car. Okay, the engine in this car is nice, and it's perfect for what this car has been intended to do, which is to be a daily driver. It's not very complicated. It's reliable. It's very fuel efficient. But obviously doesn't produce a lot of horsepower or torque, and that's okay. I'm not one of these guys that wants to have 400 or 500 horsepower by any means. I kind of enjoy having less horsepower and having to work for that horsepower. But I think that this engine can be made made to be a little bit more engaging. I think it can sound better, and I think that if if it was like in a 6-cylinder format, like a lot of BMWs are, I think that would give it that extra oomph that many people are looking for, and be quicker, but I think also a little bit more engaging. And and obviously Mazda should definitely bring back the manual transmission option. And I think that's a differentiating factor for it, especially if it ends up creating a rear-wheel drive car. Just giving that option for a car this size to have the rear-wheel drive option, I think would be awesome, and would be definitely a game changer. So this car's close. It looks great. It feels awesome inside. The handling's really good, especially for what it is. But I think that if this car could come equipped with rear-wheel drive and maybe have an inline-6 engine, those would basically be the two more components that would effectively make this a Japanese BMW. And the good news is that although this car doesn't have those components, Mazda has announced that its next generation Mazda 6 will come equipped with a rear-wheel drive platform, and it's going to be using an inline 6-cylinder engine. And I'm confident that the incorporation of these two missing ingredients will ultimately result in the creation of a Japanese BMW. And what's even more important in that regard is that this BMW, or this Japanese BMW, quote unquote, is going to be really the only available BMW in the market, because like we talked about, some of these other cars the BMW's been building recently that have become very refined and don't have a manual transmission options, that are very heavy. Those cars are they're kind of going away from the formula that made BMW what it is. And I think Mazda has picked up on that and is making a great decision to effectively fill that gap, because there is that demand for that type of a car. All right, so that's my driving review of the 2016 Mazda 6 Touring. I hope you enjoyed this video and review. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for more videos. There are going to be a lot more videos coming your way. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.